Okay, so we're up to the chapter called Drums. The very next morning, Mafatu set out about building his canoe. He had banked his fire the night before in the natural shelter of a cave, and he resolved never to let the sparks die out, for it was altogether too difficult to make fire with a fire stick, and it required too much time. In Hikiru, for that reason, the fires were always kept burning, and it was the special charge of the younger members of a family to see that the fuel was ever at hand. Woe unto the small boy who let the family fire go out. While his breakfast roasted in the coals, the boy cleared the brush away from the base of the great tamanu. There was no wood better for canoe building than this. It was tough, durable, yet buoyant in the water. Mafato could fell this tree by fire and burn it out too. Later, he would grind an adze out of basalt for the finished work. The adze would take a long time, but he had made them often in Hikuru, and he knew just how to go about it. The boy was beginning to realize that the hours he had spent fashioning utensils were to stand him now in good stead. Nets, knives, shark line, implements, and fishhooks. He knew how to make them all. How he had hated those tasks in Hikuru. But he was quick and clever with his hands, and now he was grateful for the skill which was his. The fire crackled and snapped about the base of the tree. When at length it had eaten well into the trunk, Mafato climbed aloft and crept cautiously out upon a large branch that overhung the beach. Then, taking firm hold of the branches above his head, he began to jump up and down. As the fire ate deeper into the trunk, the tree began to lean under the boy's weight. With a snap and a crash, it fell across the sand. As it fell, Mafato leaped free of the branches, as nimble as a cat. That's enough for today, Uri, he decided. Tomorrow we'll build our fires down the trunk and start burning it out. When the eaters of men come, we will be ready. In the meantime, there were many other things to do. A fish trap of bamboo, a net of sennet, a fish hook too, if only he could find some bone. And while the canoe was building, how could Mafato get out to the distant reef to set his trap, unless he first made a raft of bamboo? The boy decided that the raft was of the first importance. He chose a score or more of fine bamboo, as large around as his arm. Felling them by fire, then he lashed them together with strips of Peru bark, making a sturdy raft of 2 thicknesses. It would serve him well until his canoe could be finished. As his work, his mind returned again and again to the wild pig he was determined to kill. How could he go back to Hikuru without a boar's tooth necklace? Why, that necklace was almost as important as the canoe, for by that token men would know his strength and courage. When the day came that he should leave this island, he would sail to the north and east. Somewhere in that quarter lay the cloud of islands, the great Tuamatu archipelago, which extends across 1,000 miles of ocean and 10 degrees of latitude. Within those reef-spiked channels floated Hikuru, his homeland. There was no doubt in his mind that he would find it, for Maui, who had led him safe to this shore, would someday guide him home again. But first, Mafatu knew, he must prove himself worthy. Men should never again call him Mafatu, the boy who was afraid, and Tavananui should say with pride, "Here is my son, come home from the sea." Kiwi, the albatross, came and went on his mysterious errands, emerging out of blue space, vanishing into it again. At sundown regularly, the white bird came wheeling and circling to light clumsily on the beach almost at Mafatu's side, while Uri pranced about and greeted his friend after his own fashion. As for Uri, he was having the time of his life, for there were countless seabirds nesting among the shore to be chased, and wild goats and pigs in the mountains to make life exciting for any dog. Mafatu had discovered a mulberry tree. He stripped off the bark and removed the inner white lining. Then he wet the fiber and laid it on a flat stone and set about beating it with a stick of wood. The fiber spread and grew thinner under the beating. The boy added another strip, wet it, and beat it into the first one, then another and another. Soon he had a yard of cloth to serve as a loincloth, a Peru. It was soft and white, and now at least he had some clothes. Before I go home, I will make a dye of Ava and paint a fine design on my Peru, the boy promised himself. I must not go back ill-clothed and empty-handed. Men must know that I have conquered the sea and made the land serve me as well. The days passed in a multitude of tasks that kept Mafatu busy from dawn till dark. His lean-to grew into a three-sided house with bamboo walls and a thatch of palm leaves. The fourth wall was open to the breezes of the lagoon. It was a trim little house, and he was proud of it. A roll of woven mats lay on the floor. There was a shelf in the wall with 3 bowls cut from coconut shells. Bone fish hooks dangled from a peg. There was a coil of sennet many feet long, an extra Peru of tapa, waterproofed with gum of the artu tree for wet weather. All day long the wind played through the openings in the walls. At night lizards scurried through the thatch with soft rustlings. One morning, wandering far down the beach, Mafatu came upon a sheltered cove. His heart gave a leap of joy, for there, white gleaming, was all that remained of the skeleton of a whale. It might not have meant very much to you or me, but to Mafatu it meant knives and fishhooks galore, splintered bone for darts and spears, a shoulder blade for an axe. It was a treasure. The boy leaped up and down in his excitement. "Hurry!" he shouted. "We're rich! Come, help me drag these bones home." His hands seemed all thumbs in his eagerness. He tied as many bones as he could manage into 2 bundles. One bundle he shouldered himself, the other Ori dragged behind him, and thus they returned to camp, weary but filled with elation. Even the dog seemed to have some understanding of what this discovery meant. Or, if not, he was at least infected with his master's high spirits. He leapt about like a sportive puppy, yapping until he was hoarse. Now began the long process of grinding the knife and the axe. Hour after hour, squatting before a slab of basalt, Mafatu worked until his hands were raw and blistered, and sweat ran down from his eyes. The knife emerged first, since that was the most important. Its blade was 10 inches long, its handle a knob of joint. It was sharp enough to cut the fronds of coconut trees, to slice off the end of a green nut. Ah, but it was a splendid knife. All Mafatu's skill went into it. It could be a fine weapon as well, the boy thought grimly, as he ground it down to a sharp point. Some sea robber had been breaking into his bamboo trap, and he was going to find out who the culprit was. Probably that old tiger shark that was always cruising around, as if he owned the lagoon. Fishing with a line took too long when you were working against time. Mafatu could not afford to have his trap robbed. Twice it had been broken into, the stout bamboos crushed, and the contents eaten. It was the work either of a shark or an octopus, that was certain. No other fish was strong enough to snap the tough bamboo. Mafatu's mouth was set in a grim line as he worked away on his knife. That old tiger shark, it was probably the thief. Mafatu came to recognize him, for every day when the boy went out with his trap, that shark, larger than all the others, was circling around, watchful. The other sharks seemed to treat the tiger shark with deference. Hunger alone drove Mafatu out to the reef to set his trap. He knew that if he was to maintain strength to accomplish all that lay ahead, he must have fish to add to his diet of fruit. But often as he set his trap far out by the barrier reef, the tiger shark would approach, roll over in his passing. The cold gleam of his eyes filled Mafatu with dread and anger. "Wait, you," the boy threatened darkly, shaking his fist at the Mau. "Wait until I have my knife. You will not be so brave then. You will run away like the little fish you are." But the morning that the knife was finished, Mafato did not feel so brave as he would have liked. He hoped he would never see the tiger shark again. Paddling out to the reef, he glanced down from time to time at the long-bladed knife where it hung around his neck by a cord of sennit. It wasn't, after all, such a big weapon. It was only a knife made by a boy from a whale's rib. Uri sat on the edge of the raft, sniffing at the wind. Mafato always took his dog along, for Uri howled unmercifully if he was left behind, and Mafato had come to rely upon the companionship of the little yellow dog. The boy talked with the animal as if he were another person, consulting with him, arguing, playing when there was time for play. They were very close, these two. This morning, as they approached the spot where the fishing trap was anchored, Mafato saw the polished dorsal of the hated tiger shark circling in the water. It was like a triangle of black basalt, making a little furrow in the water as it passed. "Ay, Mao!" the boy shouted roughly, trying to bolster up his courage. "I have my knife today. See, coward, who robs traps? Catch your own fish." The tiger shark approached the raft in leisurely fashion. It rolled over slightly, and its gaping jaws seemed to curve in a grin. Uri ran to the edge of the raft, barking furiously. The hair on the dog's neck stood up in a bristling ridge. The shark was unconcerned and moved away. Then, with a whip of its powerful tail, it rushed at the bamboo fish trap and seized it in its jaws. Mafato was struck dumb. The tiger shark shook the trap as a terrier might shake a rat. The boy watched fascinated, unable to move. He saw the muscles work in the fish's neck as the great tail thrashed the water to fury. The trap splintered into bits, while the fish within escaped only to vanish into the shark's mouth. Mafato was filled with impotent rage. The hours he had spent making that trap, but all he could do was shout threats at his enemy. Uri was running from side to side of the raft, furious with excitement. A large wave sheeted across the reef. At that second, the dog's shift in weight tipped the raft at an angle. With a helpless yelp, Uri slid off into the water. Mafato sprang to catch him, but he was too late. Instantly, the tiger shark whipped about. The wave slewed the raft away. Uri, swimming frantically, tried to regain it. There was desperation in the brown eyes, the puzzled eyes so faithful and true. Mafato strained forward. His dog, his companion. The tiger shark was moving in slowly. A mighty rage stormed through the boy. He gripped his knife. Then he was over the side in a clean, curving dive. Mafato came up under his enemy. The shark spun about. Its gruff hide scraped the flesh from the boy's shoulder. In that instant, Mafato stabbed deep into the white belly. There was a terrific impact. Water lashed to foam. Stunned, gasping, the boy fought for life and air. It seemed that he would never reach the surface. Ay, his lungs would burst. At last his head broke above the water. Putting his face to the surface, he saw the great shark turn over fathoms deep. Blood flowed from the wound in its belly. Instantly, gray shapes rushed in. Other sharks teared the wounded tiger shark to pieces. Uri, where was he? Mafato saw his dog then. Uri was trying to pull himself up on the raft. Mafato seized him by the scruff and dragged him up to safety. Then he caught his dog to him and hugged him, talking to him foolishly. Uri yelped for joy and licked his master's cheek. It wasn't until Mafato reached shore that he realized what he had done. He had killed the shark with his own hands, with nothing but a bone knife. He could never have done it for himself. Fear would have robbed his arm of all strength. But he had done it for Uri, his dog, and he felt suddenly humble with gratitude. We'll continue this a little later.